conferences that we go to, and, the training sessions that, I got to see from, years of organizational learning. And I was just like, this hasn't changed. And it makes perfect sense, because again, going back to how we believed we were supposed to learn, how that behavior was encoded in us, we transferred it from our elementary experiences to our high school experiences to our university college experiences to our life experiences to the work experience. It did not change because it's what we knew.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Favor.
How's it going?
I'm really good. It's a beautiful day. Talking to you. We're going to nerd out a little bit. What could be better?
Right? Same here. I'm looking forward to this because, we think about all this stuff, and, when we met on Clubhouse, we just connected. And that's how it is with, different people. It's all about how do you connect to them? Do you have similar stories? Are you able to, connect the dots? And sometimes it takes a while to really process that, because a lot of people think a lot about a lot of things in a day. So we want to slow down the process and let you, let us know more about what you do and how this can really help them to sleep better at night.
Oh man, I'm still waiting for someone to give me all those answers. So what, in the sort of traditional title sense, I am a validated translator of neuroscience and cognitive neuroscience and behavioral science, and I am a scientific learning designer. So in a very simplified manner, what I do is I take all of the really hard, nerdy research stuff, and I've learned how to translate that into the practice of learning design, which is where I have, 20 plus years in a career as a learning designer.
Tell me more about design, because people think design is sketchpad, is paint, like how we used to do it back then. Design is so different, but people don't know about the brand and the design. So could we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, design, when it comes to the work that I do, I think before I got into the sciences and before I understood my brain, the operational system behind all of everything that we do, design to me was still very traditional as far as, a learning landscape goes. I think most of us were brought up in a very traditional educational setting. And what did our teachers do? Well, they planned out lessons. So when we talked about learning, it was how do we plan a day-to-day, half an hour to 5 minutes, at a time. And then, fast forward into a career that then I started off as an academic and as a teacher. And I started as well, lesson planning like everybody else. What are your objectives? What do you want to get out of this? What do those smart goals?
Yeah.
But once I started learning about the brain and about the operational system, that's when everything truly changed about the way that I looked at how I was doing things. And it was, okay, hold on a second. When the brain is learning, and more importantly, when it's taking in and encoding a memory, it's not about planning for that moment. It's about planning for a whole series of moments that come in the future that all have to align.
Yeah.
And the right place at the right time. It's like creating a symphony. All the right pieces have to be in the right place for it to sound beautiful. And when it comes to learning and learning design, we have to look at, not just what we're doing in the present moment, but how do we encode the memory so we can later transfer it for our future skills and use.
And when people say, it's funny, when people say common sense is not that common, it sounds like it's so cliche, but it's the actual truth.
It's pretty amazing how, even like with my own experiences, right? So I didn't know anything about neuroscience before I started this, and I was very late in my career when I got into this. But the first question that just kept coming into my head over and over again was, how did I not know this? How did I not know this? It seems very logical when you say, well, it makes sense to involve the brain in learning.
Yeah.
And yet we haven't done it for hundreds of years. So yeah, there's so much common sense there, and yet somehow we just completely overpassed it. And I'm assuming it's just because we just didn't know enough.
Right.
And once we start putting those logical pieces of the puzzle not only together, but then we actually start using them then we're solidifying, okay, this is common sense. This is super practical, but I need to use it in order for me to transfer it from, this is something that just sounds really cool, to, no, this is something that can really change the way I do things and the way that I perceive the world in itself.
Don't you think this also has a role to play with people taking a risk and having the fear of taking that risk without knowing what the result could be?
Oh, always. It took me, when it comes to fear, now fear is obviously like a massive response in the brain, right? And can really sort of, the thing that people need to know about the emotional centers of the brain is that they're highly connected to our logical centers. And the centers that allow us to problem solve and to focus and, to set our goals and to think rationally. And because those two pieces and those two areas of the brain are so highly connected, is when you sort of trigger that fear response, it's so strong that it can take the executive function offline, which means we're no longer thinking logically or rationally or any of those things. So it's funny because I was quoted by someone once, and it's actually a good quote of my own, saying, we don't change, I think it was like, we don't change because of we don't change because of fear, we change because we face the fear itself, or something to those respects, right? And it is a real thing, though, is there's that triggers based on our previous experiences, the memories, the way that our body has encoded that experience, and how then we tangibly, physically react to things that are totally going to hold us back, unless we start to recognize what those things are. And then as a fundamental human practice, how do we manage them so that we can move forward, acknowledging the fear, but then redirecting that pathway so that we can, move forward towards the successes that we want.
That's true. And once you start to overcome that fear, that's where the confidence comes in. That's what you think about. People say also Godfidence too. Like it's a lot of that inner power being that you have to let out. And most people are fearful because they couldn't do it when they were 7, and now they're 27 and they're feeling like, damn, I wish I did it when I was 10. So there's always this regret coming back and forth, and people keep playing that in their mind without focusing on the actual goal, which is what they intend to do. And now that they're wiser, they could do it better, but they still don't do it.
Yeah, those, if we look, in the brain itself, and if we were to look at the bits and the pieces and the things that put it all together, there's these specific pathways and, chemicals that are released based on how we've encoded that response. And past a certain age, so up until the age of about 25 is the latest, right? Your brain is not fully developed yet. So that executive function isn't fully developed until at latest 25 years old. Now think about all the ridiculous and amazing epic mistakes that you made when you were younger, So we look at like the crazy things that we would have done when we were teenagers is like our brain, and that part that doesn't allow us to think logically just was not developed yet.
Right.
But we were still molding our experiences, and we were still encoding memories of those experiences that would then later be triggered later on in our lives. Or we transferred them to other things that we were doing. So to literally look at those responses as these highways of networks that we've built in our own brains that are then releasing chemicals, which are your emotions. Emotions, I'm not sure, I'll sort of distinguish this for the audience. So emotions are literally your neurotransmitters. They're chemical responses that blast off in your brain. Feelings, however, are how we tangibly experience, how we consciously experience those emotions. So that could be in your reactions, through your physical reactions, through, the internal narrative that's going on. But it's so crazy to think that those emotions are just like this chemical response. And then what we then trigger is that tangible conscious feeling. Those are how we've encoded the memories. So when we encounter that, or then when we transfer that to something else, like something new that we want to do, we're triggering that response over and over and over again. And it's really hard to then make it stop and say, I don't want to experience that anymore. Like, can I just change that? But these are physical pieces of your brain that you then need to redirect or move around. And that's, through the beauty of neuroplasticity and synaptic plasticity, we're able to do that. We're able to change as fundamental humans, but it doesn't make the process easy. Like, anyone who's tried to change something will know this, or start a new habit will know the brain loves where it's at, because its primary job is to keep us alive, right? And how does it keep us alive? It keeps us alive by, basically keeping us safe and going, I'm good, I don't want to do that, I don't really know that, that's new, that kind of scares me, I'm cool, we'll just kind of stay here.
Right.
So it's that moment of, I'm uncomfortable, this doesn't feel good, it's hard. Those are the moments that we got the opportunity to start really changing things in there. And that's, once we get through sort of those, the challenge, if you will, of learning, because learning is hard, then we get to the victories. I call it, you'll see I've got my ideology of YAR, and YAR stands for you are really ready. And for me, it was like, you got to get through the moments of GER to get to the moment of YAR.
It's like going through the dirt to get that gem, that diamond, that resource, and it's not going to be easy finding it. That's why when you actually get it, you stick with it because it's worth less. It's like when you think about the pricelessness of the value and the worth of the value, when you start thinking about other things that are less than that worth, you start to actually wonder, damn, I don't know why I'm leaving. Think about relationships, for example. That's why I use that word like as a double entendre, because it's like, you think about it, and someone in a relationship gets someone, y'all are really good, and then you leave the good people, and you're like, why? So where are you going? So it's like that brain that gives you that comfortability, but at the same time, you don't really check yourself because of those past experiences really hurt relationships because they're not healed.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of cognitive awareness. And it takes a lot of emotional awareness. And these are things that I think we're now starting to see, that, the value of teaching these fundamental human skills from a much younger age.
Yeah.
And recognizing what are my thoughts in the moment that I'm having them, and how does that affect the way that I am then feeling? What's that doing to my body? Like, what is that whole operational system doing? And do I want to be in that place? And if the answer is no, then we can continue to sort of move forward. But to have the cognitive awareness, which none of us were trained how to do, is challenging. So, now we're adults and we're like, damn, now you're telling me all this. And that's kind of how it was for me as well. Like, even that little piece I just said about the difference between emotions and feelings, that blew my mind. Because, I had been in therapy. They had put me on all sort of drugs and stuff. And when I started understanding more about my own operational system, I was able to go back to my doctor and be like, hang on just a moment here. So this anger that comes out of me, or this anxiety that I experience for days on end, you're telling me, hold on, I'm telling you now that this is just a freaking cocktail of chemicals that just exploded out of my brain like a dirty martini, and I could potentially do something about that.
Because you can just clean it up and keep it going.
So I'm like, let me see if I can learn a little bit more about what's going on in my own brain, so that I can and now I call it joining forces with it. We don't control anything that happens in the brain, but you can harness and you can join forces with it. And that changed everything. Not just about my professional world and the way that I design learning, but like fundamentally as a human, understanding more about, my operational system itself. It's like, it's like when you get the thing from IKEA to put together the bed that has like a gajillion pieces.
Yeah.
But at least you've got the operational manual.
Exactly.
We're not given operational manuals of our brains. So I love that part of my work as a translator is to help and to sort of create the pages to give to people and say, hey, by the way, this piece does that, so watch out.
Yeah.
Or this other piece does this, and it will help you do that. So there's so many things that we can learn, and sort of we can train our brains in various different states to help us when it comes to things like being cognitively exhausted, which I think everybody has been in this past year, considering the year that we've had, or how do we emotionally regulate ourselves, or how do we just even monitor those things throughout our days to sort of make sure that we're not over-exhausting ourselves, so that we're not reacting in a way that's going to harm ourselves or anybody else. And you know, like I said, everything that I did when I started studying about the brain was to serve my profession and to serve learning design, and it has, and we'll talk about that more. But as a fundamental human, it so profoundly changed me.
That's amazing. And not a lot of people go through that process to realize that, and it is a major part of our well-being, which is the fundamental process of our learning. You know, that's why when you're younger, you pick up things quicker because you're able to really adjust and adapt. Like, I'm a self-taught drummer, you know, and you know, it makes sense now, and I'm like, that's probably what I wanted to do. I wanted to pick up the sticks and play some rhythm because that's what was running in my head. I gotta let it out. And then I think about it in my lyrics and my beats and bars. It makes sense in my composition. Then it goes down to my copy with business. So it's like, you started with sticks and now you're ending up with a pen, and so it's crazy. So I feel like if people just let go and they express themselves, it's good. But another side to it is that if you think about it this way, those experiences, some of them didn't get to fully experience that to that potential. So it's kind of like half baked. So they can't really process it because they don't know what to do about it.
It's so interesting because you say like you're a self-taught drummer. So I was a self-taught pianist from a very, very, very young age. Nice. And the one thing that I wish somebody would have paid more attention to, whether that would have been my parents or my teachers at the time, was because I picked up by ear. So I was playing by ear, and then they put me into lessons, but they didn't catch on, and they put me into the writing of music, and I did theory and all of that, and you know, I was classically trained, but they didn't catch on fast enough that when the teacher sat down to give me a new piece of music, and she would play it for me first, and then she would just play it a couple of times, I was encoding the auditory. And I was like ignoring the reading of the notes. So I never really got to learn properly how to read sheet music and how to coordinate. And it's something that I go back to now as an adult, and I'm like, well, I could teach myself how to do that now more effectively. But I missed out that opportunity back then because I guess they weren't paying attention, or I was just so damn good.
Right. It's like, I don't need this.
So, you know, 5-year-old Lauren is sitting in kindergarten playing the street to, you know, Sesame Street on the piano to 5-year-old little friends who later would go off and play Mozart and Beethoven, but never learned how to properly read the music. And so, yeah, opportunity is lost and opportunity is gained. So
that's true. Look at the artists we have today. You know, the likes of Jay-Z. You know, the likes of Kendrick. You know, people who like really show that prowess, that skill. So I think about just those two people alone when you think about writing and mental and how you process, and you're like, okay, this is how it translates. And then even in your life, it actually makes sense because you actually live a life that you control. You can be able to determine your moves. You can be able to demand your respect because, you know, when people see you, they're like, wow, when he talks, when she talks, yeah, you want to listen, you know. So then that also goes from the brain, the processing, what you go through. How do you experience those things? Do you have disaster management? Do you have a contingency? You know, like, how do you make those plans work in your advantage, to your favor, you know? So I think, like what you've said with learning, it's a process. And if you think about the traditional way of learning, and now it's different, but we've not changed that process, and it's scary.
No, we haven't, and it is scary, but there is so much opportunity. And you know, what was crazy to me is that when I looked very historically back at education, and I once gave a keynote, and it was actually quite funny, but I took them through, I think it was, 60 years of a classroom. Whoa. And they all looked the same. The clothes changed, so it was a fun little fashion forward of like, fashion.
Oh my God.
I'm like, this is the 80s, you can tell by the hair. But the classroom didn't change. And it makes perfect sense. Because going back to sort of how we believe we were supposed to learn, how that behavior was encoded in us, we transferred it from our elementary experiences to our high school experiences to our university college experiences to our life experiences to the work experience. It did not change because it's what we knew. So we know so much more now, and now it's just a matter of like, how do we have these conversations to say there are ways, and you know, whether it's through the use of what we know about psychology, and that cognitive psychology has dominated learning for a very long time. Neuroscience is still very new as far as the science goes. So, and just to give people a little bit of sort of an idea of sort of that, is when you think about psychology, you think like, oh God, that goes back like centuries and centuries. When we think about neuroscience, you know, an MRI, I'm not sure if have you been in an MRI before? Have you ever been scanned for anything?
A couple
you know what it looks like? That big sort of tube,
the big tube
machine.
Yeah, I've seen
it. On Grey's Anatomy or some sort of hospital show. You see people going into a scanner. Those scanners were only first built in 1977.
Oh.
And when you see, and anyone who's listening, if you Google first MRI, and the doctor was Dr. Damadian, Google first MRI, Dr. Damadian, and it looks like something that like Frankenstein made.
Oh my goodness.
It's like this huge thing that they made. And his grad student in some of these photos, who I suppose was the man who got to be the first one to try this thing out, looks like he's wearing like an air conditioning unit around his chest.
Oh my goodness.
Like, oh Lord, like this is how this all started. So the science is still really new. And when those machines, you know, they have EEGs, so that meant they could see like the brain waves through electricity.
Yeah.
But when those machines in the late 70s and then into the 80s became functional, then they could see inside. And that changed everything. So science is still really, really new. It's a young science, and there's so much to learn because, you know, there is nothing more complex on this planet than our own 3 pounds of meatloaves that we carry in our heads.
Right.
There's nothing more complex than our brains. So yeah, we're still uncovering so many things when it comes to, you know, how do we learn, how do we encode memories, where are the habit centers, and then how to all of these bits and pieces, because nothing works on its own in there.
Yeah.
How do all of them sort of manipulate and come together to allow us to do and think and act and move the way that we do? So when it comes to learning, yeah, we got a long way to go, and we've got so much that we can start doing right now to start enhancing the way that we learn as fundamental humans, because when you understand the process of how to learn more effectively and all of the tools in the treasure chest that you've got at your fingertips to choose from, your experience when you approach learning becomes incredibly different. And especially when you know a little bit about your brain and how it's kind of taking things in, you can really make it a more enjoyable experience. It's still going to be hard because it has to be, but yeah, it's going to be much more enjoyable when you've got more to pull from.
How does this work when it's left brain, right brain? Because I'm left-handed, you know, and I know about creative and all that good stuff. And then there's a logical piece, and then there's a learning piece.
Yeah.
How does that play a role when it comes to really like learning and taking in that maximum potential of time?
I love this question. So I love when I'm doing like at a conference or just hanging out with people, and I like to like, you know, let's say there's 1,000 people in the room. I'm like, hey, let me see my lefties. I'm like, where are like my, you know, my artsy, or my righties, like my artsy fartsies, and they all stand up. And I'm like, all right, so then that leaves the rest of my, you know, logic, sciencey, and they're like, yeah, and I'm like, okay, there's no such thing. There is no such thing as left-sided, right-sided dominance. They've done multiple studies, one prominent out of, I think it was the University of Utah years ago, and they scanned like 2,500 different brains, and they just determined there's no such thing as sideness.
Wow.
Yeah.
That just blew my mind, because it's a debate everywhere, and I'm like, why? Like, I don't get it. Like, we're the same people, you know, but I don't know. There's
no, the sideness thing, that falls into like some of the neuromyths and the neurobabble. So like, you know, that's one of a big neuromyth. Learning styles, another big neuromyth. We only use 10% of our brains. That's just absolute insanity.
Can you imagine that?
But now it's interesting because, some of these myths were perpetuated from science itself, but it was from people who didn't understand what the science was saying. And so it just kind of got rolled with. So some of so it's interesting. So, there's what I learned very early when I started learning about the brain and neuroscience, and when I started sort of integrating myself with the researchers and the scientists themselves. And this to the day still amazes me, is I would go to the hospital, the teaching hospital. I got to attend lectures, and I was really, really shy because I'm thinking, oh my God, these people, like, they're in the labs, they touch the brains. And I'm like, I don't have a PhD. I've got I got my credentials, I did my certificates, but I'm nowhere near these people. And when I went up to them and I introduced myself and said, hi, I'm Lauren, I'm like, I'm a translator and this is what I do. And they would look at me and go, oh my God, we need you. And I'm like, whoa, you guys are legends to me. I'm like, tell me more. And there's just not enough people who can translate the science, because it takes a lot of work, a lot of work to translate stuff that's so complex, but that these people spend decades of their lives researching and studying for our benefit, but it doesn't get out there in a way that we can practically use it.
That's deep that you mentioned that, because now I'm thinking about SEO, and that's what people are talking about, but when you speak, you're like, damn, I don't understand what he's saying. And I definitely understand what you mean when you translate that into actual, like, normal, natural process learning, that you really want to help someone use at least a good 10% of their brain and their time to get this one point and drive that point across. But now when it comes to, like, courses, digital courses, I think I did a research back then about e-learning, how by 2026 we're talking about trillions, with e-learning, and it's growing and people don't see that. And now everybody's a coach, everybody's an expert, everybody is making music.
It's like this. I love that you said that, because it's like, I'm going to might date myself, but I don't care. But it was like in I guess it was like the mid 90s, when everyone decided that they were a DJ. Like, I'm a DJ. And then in the 2000s, it was like everybody's a speaker. Yeah, I'm a speaker. I know, like, now it's like everyone's a coach. So what does that mean?
Right. Exactly. That's amazing that you mentioned that, because now it looks like, okay, who do we follow? Do we look at your educational experiences? Do we look at your clients' experiences? Do we look at your characteristics? Like, what do we follow so that you don't lead us astray because they're trying to learn from you?
Results would be nice. So let's circle back to learning, right? So anyone who's listening who is trying to create a course or is a content developer, it's not an easy feat to design learning so that someone can actually learn it, encode it as a memory, and then transfer it into their real life, like, to really be effective. And most people, again, because of our behaviors and the way that we were traditionally taught, we believe that if we just take everything that we know, we shove it into some videos and add some cool animations and some audio, and here's a workbook and do this sheet. Good. Yeah, those people will learn. Good. Bring me the monies, right? But there's going to be a difference between those people who are solely in it to create wealth for themselves. Yeah. And that's where, the ed tech business is, you're right, it's projected to be in the trillions, worth trillions and trillions of dollars. But then there's also going to be a camp of people like myself and those who I work with, who we have valuable skills and knowledge and experience that will help somebody grow. And when they put it in the right platform, and then when they put it and they design it in such a way that the person can really learn it and transfer it, and not just get to the end of the course or get to the end of the module and go, what did I do again?
Right.
Or they don't have to go back and say, what was that I was supposed to remember okay, wait, let me rewind that. And having to go back. Well, then you're not serving the true purpose of the learning experience. And remember, learning is the avenue to memory. So the goal is learning, yes, but the real goal is a memory that we can take out and we can use it and we can transfer it when we need it. So how do we create learning that creates the memories that people will then have to use later on. That's the more important aspect in the work that I do. And then take that a step further is, how do we respect the operational system? How do we respect the brain and work with it? That we're not putting things that are unnecessary and, using energy in the systems so that it can focus. How do we even help somebody focus? How do we guide attention when we're learning so that someone can really focus in on what you need them to focus in on to learn, to create that memory?
Yeah.
And that's when we get into the science, right? That's when we understand, and I'm not going to, I won't get too scientific, but, when even a simple fact, there are multiple networks for attention in the brain. There's not one, there's multiple, and they each do different things. There's one network that is to orient you towards something. There's another network that's for you to alert you towards things. There's another network that goes to the executive function. These are all different networks that we can use in order to guide someone's focus. But we have to know how to use them effectively, and that's when it comes into design. So when you know these things, when you know a little bit about the operational system, then I can look at design and go, okay, I want to prime this person's brain right from the very beginning, so that then when they see this, when they are alerted to this one thing, they know what's coming next.
Yeah.
And in doing that, and in spacing it out, and in repeating it, I'm creating the pathway, but I'm making it stronger. And that's what we really need to do. We have to create the pathway, but then we have to strengthen the pathway to memory. Because if not, it's like a game of snakes and ladders, right? You go up, you've got the memory, and then you go down because you haven't encoded it properly. You're all the way back to the beginning again.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's really the strengthening part that makes that memory like a masterpiece.
Yeah, it's that. So with memory, you've got sort of a simplified 3-step process, right? It's, you have to encode it, you have to store it, and then you have to retrieve it. And the encoding process is when we're doing that focused learning. That's kind of like when we're using, we're really using our focused attention to learn something merged. In the storage process, we're now having to get into that rehearsal and that practice, which is incredibly important. So we're taking things from your working memory, which is, that focused attention, and working memory is incredibly limited. So when you are designing content and when you are designing a course, you have to be aware that the brain can only take in so much at one time.
Yeah. So
you really have to focus in on what it is that you want it to take in. And the goal here then is to get to retrieval, is can we get to a stage where I can then, I've created the memory and I can retrieve it and transfer it in the appropriate way.
That's the difference. Because when you retrieve it, that means you can diversify it because you have memory of, you pretty much have proof of concept.
Well, yeah, and that's just, for me, that's what I'm looking for from the people that I work with and that I teach, right? And this is where the science of design is so highly valuable, because along the way, like I said earlier, I'm not going to wait for somebody to finish a course. I'm not going to wait for them to finish a workshop to figure out whether or not they've taken in and they can understand part of what I've told them. I'm going to be measuring that along the way so that it's helping them and it's helping me. It's helping them because they're able to see those, we call them the metacognitive moments, where they're able to go, ooh, I thought I knew that. I didn't know that. But I can design that experience in. So you realize that you might have thought you knew something, but that was just your brain creating a false memory of the experience.
Right.
Now, as a learner, you want to have those, because the last thing you want is to think that you've learned something and then to transfer it ineffectively when you have to. That's when mistakes are made. So as a designer of learning, I'm going to design that in for my own purposes so I can measure how effective is the way that I've designed working. It's also going to show my learners, where are you in your process? And you can either skip this or you need to revisit it.
And sometimes people skip it thinking, I'm going to, I don't need this.
Right. And then I'm the designer who will go in and maybe 2 modules or 2 things later, I'll show them how I will prove to them in a moment through an activity or through a question or through an experience. You thought you knew, but you didn't know.
Do you think it's a thrill of adventure for them to just, because I'm like, here's the road, get this. Okay, you've heard me speak for an hour. but you still doubt the fact that what I'm telling you is the way to go, and you still go and look for another way to figure it out. Like, it makes no sense to me. Sometimes I'm like, is that how the brain works?
Yes. Remember that whole thing. It's like, I know this. I've got this. This makes me feel comfortable. This is the way I feel comfortable doing it. Thank you. But it's the, maybe I don't know this. I don't know this is making me feel uncomfortable. Okay, I want to see why I'm feeling uncomfortable. So it's, can you have those moments of sort of appreciating that? And I do, when I make a mistake, or when I do, like, and I do a lot, I do, like, I'm the queen of my own experimentations. But when I recognize my own moments of complete and utter discomfort, I run towards them. Like, I absolutely run towards them, because I want to know what that is, because that to me is a signal. My body's not lying. It's like the best lie detector I've possibly got, but it's sending me that signal of, like, girl, like, girl, stop fooling us. Like, we know that that's not true, or I know that I don't really understand that. So be okay with that, because that's learning.
That's deep. It makes total sense, because now you focus on yourself, and then yourself starts to figure out things that you didn't know. That's why that exploration, that curiosity, that whole, that dopamine effect, like, oh, I know that, okay, I can do this now. And then you feel better about it, because now you're actually challenging yourself to resist that tension.
Yes, because, we can design learning, we can design content, we can design anything, sales pitches, anything, branding. We can design it for the reward centers. We can design it just to feel good. We can set dopamine off, we can hit up the serotonin. Yeah, we're having a great chemical of goodness up there.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to transfer into a full encoding memory experience. Right. So I think you've really got to be really conscientious of that. And that's why I always err on the side of caution with people who want to gamify things too quickly, right? I'm like, yeah, it's fun, but did you remember, what you wanted to transfer? No? Okay, right? Like, hey, I play Nintendo like everybody else. It felt really good when I saved that princess.
Right.
But can I take you through the skills that I learned from playing Mario? No.
Not possible.
I know that I learned, video games are great because they do give you logic and strategy and all those things. Like, I learned after falling through that, that tunnel one too many times, don't go down that tunnel. There's one of those eating plants waiting for you. Right.
Exactly.
But yeah, I don't, it's not that true encoding experience that we want. So you really got to sort of, if you really want someone to learn, if you really want them to remember something and then transfer it, you got to be very cautious that you're just not giving them a big shot of reward that makes them feel as if they've accomplished it.
Yeah.
You really, really got to have to be able to transfer it.
That's true. I'm thinking this now for course creators who actually are serious about what they're doing, because all of them are serious. And I'm thinking the way they're processing, the way they learn, because some people buy courses from others to see what they're doing, because you can't really know what a course is like until you're in one or you make one. So what's the best process? And this is for the benefit of the person learning. This has nothing to do with the creator, because you're at the mercy of these people that need this information because they're paying you to do something for them. So the way they're going to learn is highly dependent on how you structure your content. So how can they do that without thinking or overwhelming them as well?
I think the very first thing to remember is it's not about you. It's never about us and what we want to share with people. It's what they need to learn from us. And that, just continually reminding yourselves that, is that, yeah, we get excited about our own content. We get excited about all the things that we know. We want to share those things. And some of those things are super awesome and super cool, but they have no value to the person who needs to transfer them. So you've constantly got to check in with yourself, right? So, when you look at, and I use this analogy a lot on podcasts and interviews, but it sort of holds true, is that when you look at your content, right, and there's usually way, way too much of it, as far as what is the skill, what is the ability, what is the behavior, what's the knowledge that you want someone to transfer. And if it's not in that piece of content, then it's just content that's not needed necessarily. So if you look at it like a tower of blocks, I use this analogy a lot, and you put your content into blocks and you start stacking up the tower, can you start removing blocks? Does the tower still stay up? That means the learning is stable, right? You can take things away that don't necessarily help with the transfer of the skill, the behavior, the knowledge that you want someone to have. When the tower starts falling over, okay, removing content, then those are probably things that are just really nice to know. And it takes a lot of, as the course creator, it takes a lot of sort of intention and strategy to continually look back at your materials. And this is something that I struggle with as well, because you have to continually be asking yourself those questions. Is this absolutely necessary to be encoded as a memory? Is it worth the energy that this person's brain is going to have to use to process this? You know, the brain is very, very expensive, and the currency is energy. And when you used up that energy too quickly in your courses, it's done. Learning can't happen. It's exhausted.
That just makes a lot of sense, because now some people do courses and they're literally on video and they're just talking, and some people would love that because they want to see their best, you know, their favorite person talking, you know. At the same time, somebody else wants to just have that white blank keynote, you know, with simple text, you know, make sure that it's audible and you get your point across. And then some other people just want pictures and they just want you to talk to them. So when you think about visual learning and auditory learning, what's the best practice for people who want to just set it off without thinking too far?
You know, I think it's the best advice I can give is that, so we all learn differently, right? Like, we've got the same pieces in our brains and they all operate and they do things, you know, and we can work with those systems. But at the end of the day, people are still going to do what they want to do. But how do we make it easier, right? So how do we sort of, you know, protect the resource, if you will? So, you know, anybody who's seen any one of my slide decks, they're very simplified, incredibly simplified, because I'm very aware of how much the brain is going to process if I put too much in there. And the same goes for your auditory, and the same goes for your, you know, any of your visual resources. So, you know, if you think that even in this conversation that we're having, you know, some people are just going to be listening to this on the podcast. They're just going to be listening to our tones, right? There's probably things going on around them. Are they fully focused on what we're talking about? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
That, you know, that's one thing. When it comes to the visuals, like, what is my brain processing? Well, I'm looking at you on my screen. So that's one part of my brain that's encoding, you know, the vision, the visual aspects of looking at you. I'm watching the motion of your head nod at me. I'm looking at the colors. It's processing colors. That's just 3 things I've listed that only one part of our brain is doing. Now there's another part that's going to be encoding the audibles, right? There's going to be another part that's listening to the language, it's understanding the words, it's putting it together in sentences. We're now up to 6, 7 things it's doing right now in this moment, and it's scanning the environment around me.
Exactly.
So when you're designing learning, you really want to think about the energy it's going to be taking. So the more things you put in, the harder the brain has to work. So if you've got visuals going on, if you've got, you know, music in the background, you're like, hey, look at this text. You're speaking on top of it. It's like, whoa.
Slow down.
Too much. You know, I used to use this visual. I'm totally going to date myself. But Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Like the old arcade game, Street Fighter. You've got like one person on the other side, and I picture the brain on the other. Right?
Yeah.
It's like it's going to be KO'd. Your power bar is going down. It's like visual, auditory, colors, text. You know, boom, KO'd.
Right.
So, you know, like, there's a good visual for everyone.
It is.
But managing, just kind of thinking about the resource itself, right? Yeah. And just bring it back to you. You know how tiring it is just to look at something and listen to something and like try to keep up with all of that. But your resource is very limited. That working memory, that sweet spot where you've got the opportunity to start transferring it into long-term, you really got to protect that. And the only way to protect the working memory is to make sure you're not exhausting it by putting too much in at once.
It makes so much sense. Even with music, if you start adding too many beats and bars and claps and hats, you're going to start messing up with the experience of the ear, and too much noise is bad noise and someone's just going to shut down.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, right? It's like when you've got one bongo too many at the party.
Like stop it. Exactly. It's terrible. You don't want to be there because you just be feeling like, man, somebody needs to get some medicine because your head's going to explode.
All you hear is the bongo. I don't hear anything else anymore. It's just bongo. Exactly. It's the same with your courses, right? What a great analogy to give out. What's the bongo? Is that what people should be focused on? No? Okay.
Exactly.
Redirect that.
Exactly. I love the way you put it out because it just makes total sense. From Street Fighter to bongo, you'd be like, yeah, man, that's what they're enjoying now because they don't want to hear too much. Like when it's so real serious, people are like, man, I need some comedy in my life because it's about color. It's about how do you design and help that person process it. So I think going forward, what would you tell a course creator or someone who has a skill that wants to create a course and doesn't know how to put it together because of all this moving parts?
Call me. I'll help you.
First of all.
I would say, I can give them the same process that I would go through, which is, I will do a massive content dump. Just get it all out. And you'll come up with like tons and tons and tons of stuff that you think is important. And you want to look at that map and be like, okay, I think this is all really cool and really important. And I'll go through that list, like, is it a transferable skill that my people need? No, it's not. Okay, off to the side it goes. Maybe it's like just a little bit of content that I can use as a supplementary read or a video, whatever it is. And I just keep going through. And like, is this something that they can use? And is it something that they can transfer? Yes or no? Because if it's a no, then I'm taking it out because it's going to, like, again, it's valuable energy that I don't need to be wasting in that person's brain.
Yeah.
And I just keep doing that. I keep going through that process. Now, that's the first step. Once it comes to designing the actual, like, what are you going to do first and what's going to come next and how does this all have to put together in that beautiful symphony? It's like any other profession in the world. I'm not a doctor because I don't understand how to, I'm not a surgeon. I don't know how to cut into people. I don't have those skills. Learning design is a skill. And it's something that I've personally practiced for over 20 years now. It's something that we learn to do and we just learn to do it really, really well. And it takes strategy and it takes intention. Now add in science and it's just like, it's what I call my happy madness. It drives me insane. Like even my own creations, they drive me absolutely crazy because it takes the diligence to not just look at what I'm doing in module 1, but how does that affect what I'm doing in module 4?
Yeah.
How do I reinforce and keep building upon that knowledge so that I know that I'm helping that person encode this as a transferable skill or behavior or knowledge? That's where it really becomes challenging. But I'd say people out there are doing the absolute best that they can for the most part, but those who really, really, really want to get intentional about the way that they're designing to truly help someone learn, to help them remember something, reach out to an instructional designer or get at least a little bit of the fundamentals of how to design properly. Because otherwise, you probably, I've seen tons of courses out there that are they're dope. Like they're just cool and they're fun. And I remember certain parts of them.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I didn't get anything out of it that I can say, oh yeah, I use that right now. This is how I can practically use this. This is how I actually used it in my professional life. I don't get much of that from the courses that are out there. But they were cool and they were engaging, and I remember that quiz that was that I failed, and then I just kept doing over and over and over again because you let me do that.
Right. You're just dripping them back.
So I can get that completion bar and be like, yeah, complete, check mark, next module.
It's so strategic, and when you think about it now, in my mind, I'm like, nah, I can't keep doing that. It's not helping because I wouldn't be in that course. I wouldn't be in that class, and I wouldn't take notes because I wouldn't be focusing on the notes. I'll be focusing on how long is this class going to go along for. So you start thinking about the other things that your brain is now processing, which is taking you away from the actual being there. So that's why I even think about it now with courses. And this is something I a lot of people don't know. But because this is an episode, in case you're hearing this, then you're listening. Because my goal is for the Pinterest and SEO Marketing Club on Clubhouse. I already have a course out, but I want to have a bundle where I'm going to have 2 different courses, one for Pinterest, one for SEO, but they're going to be so audio based that you can sleep and listen to it while you can literally retain the brain. And then when you really want to make a move, we can now talk about it and have an actual visual conversation about it. So I want to see how that goes differently from the keynotes and, the presentations, which I love. And I may do a few of them just to give them that fundamental, but like for them to understand and transfer that information into their mind, that could work because things are changing and you have to keep doing something new. So I'm wondering if you like, with your experience, would you listen to something like that and be like, maybe, because people listen to ebooks, but would that be something that you would pay attention to?
I think it's, again, I look at any of the strategies and any of the methodologies, I'm looking at the functionality of how it's being used, to transfer. So if it's an auditory thing, and I'm sure like with other people, I listen to podcasts. Now I'm a huge nerd, so like I just listen to like nerdy podcasts. Now when I'm listening to them though, I can't help, again, my professional bias here is when I'm listening, I'm getting ready to learn at the same time. So I'm giving myself permission. I've got a notebook beside me to press pause. And I'm not an annoying person who's like, pause, rewind, pause, rewind. I'm like a kid from the 80s with a tape cassette, pause, rewind. Because I don't want it to go into my brain and my brain go, oh, but I really wanted to know more about that, right? So we've got these opportunities to sort of give learners permission as well. So, I'll give you a couple of examples. So first of all, when I do a keynote, when I do a workshop, when I do anything, one of the things that anybody who knows who have seen me do anything will hear me say is sit back, relax, enjoy. You're going to learn nothing. You're going to learn absolutely nothing from me in this moment. So just sit back, relax, and enjoy. That's the first thing I tell them. The encoding process of memory does not happen that fast.
Wait, hold on. If you say sit back, relax, and enjoy in a course or in a keynote, does that do something fundamentally to them to start paying attention, or does that kind of veer them away?
No, I think it gives people permission just to understand that it's not the process of memory. It's not how it works, right? And, I think for every keynote, especially the larger organizational ones that I give, you want people to learn faster than they actually can. Yeah. It doesn't work like that. You send people off to conferences, you send them for 8 hours worth of training, and you want them to transfer it the next day, but it does not work like that. Memory consolidates while we're sleeping. So how do you expect someone to, pick something up within that time? So I give my audiences permission. I'm like, nah, man, like relax. I want you to enjoy this ride and I want you to be curious. And the other permission that I give them is to ignore me. When your brain hears something that I say and it goes, oh my God, it's kind of like this, or ooh, I kind of want to know that for later, ignore me, because you're not going to get that moment with your brain back. When your mind goes, ooh, 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 that's working memory. And if you let that moment go, it's like those moments you're like, oh, damn, what was that again?
Right, like the train.
Later, like, oh, what was that? And you may get that back.
Yeah.
But the chances are small that if you just give yourself permission, so similar with like the auditory, what you were asking about with these podcasts and with just listening, is if you give someone the opportunity and you say, hey, by the way, listen to this maybe passively that first time, right? But if you really want to learn from this, get your notebook ready. And the second that I say something, your brain goes, ooh, yeah, this is what I need. Stop and chase that curiosity. Because the other thing people need to know, when you're learning and you have a base of something in your brain, it's called a schema. And the schema is a representation of knowledge in your brain, groups of knowledge. So maybe it's starting to build on that network of knowledge. And it's starting to make that connection. And we want to capture those in the moments that it's happening. If we let that go, then you're just relying on your memory to go like, damn it, what did Favor say again? What was that thing? Right? Oh
Yeah.
man, what time was that at? Like every time I hear something in a podcast, if I just want to keep listening to it, I'll take a screenshot of time so I can go back and revisit that one thing.
Right.
I'll just keep time marking. And that is studying, my friends. That is learning. That is going back and rehearsing and, really encoding that. Otherwise, it's passive learning. It might be short term. You might be able to use something for the very short term. You want that in your brain for the long term. You gotta work for it. You gotta do the practice.
And does writing something? This is the last thing that I would ask. Does writing and typing, are those two different things when it comes to memory and recovery?
Yeah, so it is, only because if you think about the process, which can you do faster, type or write? Well, actually, I guess it depends on who you are. Some of those two-finger typers out there.
Right. Now, for me, Now, for me, I think I type really fast. I think because I also went through the typing classes and everything back then. So I can literally say a sentence in I can literally finish a sentence in 3 seconds and finish the whole sentence on a typing. But when I'm writing, I can do the same thing, but I'm cautious of, I don't want to make a mistake. But at the same time, when you're spreading out those ideas, it feels better because it's actually coming out on a pen, because you're actually letting those emotions out. But I don't know what it does psychologically.
I mean, it slows depending on how fast you can do either. Obviously, it slows down the process itself. It's a different type of motor activity. It's a different part of the brain that's being activated when you're typing versus when you're writing. And for me, I sometimes I like writing, right? Like I was of the generation where they still made us, learn how to handwrite and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But then obviously, when I learned how to type faster, it was better because I was like, oh man, my thoughts come so fast that to be able to write them quickly was a really, that was really, really beneficial.
Yeah.
When I'm studying for myself though, and when I'm learning myself, I write. I take the time. And I have very specific techniques that I use as far as, like I said, capturing those things that I want to learn, rereading, creating the notes, creating a visual for myself. When I really want to learn something, I'm going to take my time and set myself up to do it the best way I know how.
Yeah.
So that goes into the arsenal of, all of the things that I've got in my treasure chest and to pull out and say, this is how I'm going to note take. This is how I'm going to absorb my auditory learning. This is what I'm going to do when I'm looking at a visual. I'm fortunate. I've studied for years on how to do this. But you guys are fortunate because now you don't have to read all the white papers that I did.
It's like, yay.
Yay! You don't have to do all the really, really hard work that I had to do. It's done for you.
Right, literally.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is great. I'm so glad you're able to be here today and just help us really break down, sit down, take a pen, relax, sit back and just focus on what do you really want to do so that the right person comes through and can tell the next person so that you can still do what you love doing best, Yeah,
honor and respect. I mean, I love the experiences and the things that other humans can do. They fascinate me. From looking at a waiter or a waitress carry 6 plates at a time, which I'm like, wow, I can't do that. I could learn. I know I could train myself to do it.
Right.
I've got mad respect for the training your brain had to do in order to do that, or the artist or the work that you do favorite. It's just phenomenal. But if we really want other people to learn that from us, we have to set it up in a way that they can.
Yeah. Damn. That's a bar. Mic drop. Thank you so much. If there's any way they can reach out to you, what are the options they have?
So you can hit me up on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Learningpirate.com is the website that is in desperate need of an overhaul. So if any of my designers out there who want to get in touch with me for that, that's how you can get in touch with me. For my course creators out there, there is a limited time offer to work with me to audit your courses or portions of your courses for 2 hours with me, which is at a hella reduced rate, just because I just want people putting out better content. So those of you who really, really, really do want to share your value and your knowledge and your skills, you know, maybe for another month I'll do this just because of my capacity. But yeah, there's an audit offer up there for a bunch of people as well.
Amazing. You guys better catch it before it's gone. You'll be like, oh no, the train's gone. Yeah.
My cognitive limits or my resources are there too. But yeah, learningpirate.com, or I'm on Clubhouse, as you know. I love chatting with the people and whatever I can share to help, especially during these times. I'm always here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you, Lauren.
Yar.
Yar.
I yar a lot.
Yar, that's how we're going to end it.
Yeah, you are really ready. Go get it.
Thank you. Enjoy yourself and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. You as well.
Yeah.